I just wanted to be in engineering away from other people. I didn't want to be near press. I just wanted to work on more designs. I kept design after design after design after design I did for Apple.
And you wanted to share all of the schematics and how everything...
Not from Apple, this company. When the money got put in, we had to incorporate, and I was forced to leave Hewlett-Packard, where I had determined I would be an engineer for life. Engineers are good. Politicians aren't. Management is politicians, striving for different job positions and having to say bad things about people, and I couldn't do that, but I could do engineering. So, what were you saying?
Well, just because I learned this, that you had the Apple II was expandable with the 8 slots.
Oh, okay. Coming on for designing the products. They were all mine. The Apple I and the Apple II, nobody helped. I did all the hardware, all the software. When I look back to how much software I did, I look back now at my old designs, and I say, how could I ever have had the energy to do that? And how could I have come up with things that were so far out of the books? Color. Our first logo was 6 colors. You might wonder why. And it's because the Apple II computer, I designed games for Atari like Breakout. A game would be 100 chips and 1,000 wires. And an engineer like me would have to keep track of every wire. It might take 6 months to make a new game prototype. The Apple II computer was the first time ever that arcade games were being started by Atari right here in Los Gatos, California, where we are today. I could go down there and learn to play games early. And Steve Jobs would be wiring up my design for Breakout. We delivered a working Breakout. But the Apple II computer was the first time ever that arcade games were color. And the first time ever they were software. A 9-year-old kid could write a good game for the day in 1 day. 1 day in BASIC. This was a change for gaming as much as for computers. That was a machine. And where it all came from was I was on the Atari floor, and I thought, man, it'll be neat if someday these games are in color. It would be beautiful. And then my head went back. I was an analog engineer. I was a television engineer too. And I went back to how color is a sine wave on a wire that goes at the exact right speed, and it shows up as red. And if it's a little later in time, it's blue, and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, I don't know, there's books and books on mathematics, differential calculus to design these circuits, how all these, existential waves in mathematics created color TV. There are books on it. And I just said, what if you took a little number out of a computer that's ones and zeros, right out of the computer memory, and you put it on a wire into the TV? If the ones and zeros got fed at the right rate, I knew every color TV would think it was color. Never could any book have talked about that little simple approach. Just a pixel in a certain spot shows up as green, and a pixel in the next spot over shows up as red. I mean, that was kind of amazing, but I just thought that way. I don't know where these ideas came from. One after another for about 10 years in my life, and even before Apple.
Right.
And you're starting with the blue box.
You're just laying in bed thinking about this, like, oh my God, I have to put this in the...
Oh no, I didn't sleep for 4 days and nights doing Breakout for Atari. This was not possible even for me to do in 4 days and nights, but I did it. I did it. So your head, but if you're not sleepy, if you're not getting to sleep, your head drifts off in weird tangents, in between standing up. You might sleep a little bit, whatever it's called. And that's where this color idea had popped in. I'm started thinking about it in my head and seeing the solution. That wound up being a huge part of Apple.
And when you come up with these ideas, you want to share publicly with everybody like what the idea is and how to replicate it.
Not exactly. I was in a club of people, Stanford professors on down, all sorts of people that weren't rich and wealthy, but they're talking about if we ever had our own computers, it's getting close to the price with a microprocessor, we could afford our own computers. And they were trying to build kits that weren't even useful computers. They were something I'd built 5 years before. Matter of fact, right when I met Steve Jobs, I was building a computer, my own design. And they were trying to do it the wrong way, and I wanted things that were human. Keyboard, a typewriter is human, a keyboard and a display. And I'd already learned that my TV could be a display for Pong, in games like that, Breakout. But I'd also then gone and made my TV a terminal. I made it so it could actually show lettered words and connect over the phone line to a new thing called the ARPANET. What is the ARPANET? Today it's the internet.
Yeah.
On that time there were only 6 computers on the ARPANET, started by the U.S. government to put faraway computers, and I could dial a number in Palo Alto, and then I could log onto the ARPANET, and then I could see a list of 6 computers, and I could pick one at MIT and go there, and then it would say, do you want to log in as a guest or as a user? Guest. I didn't have accounts. And then I'd get on, I could read files, and I could play games like chess. And this was a terminal I'd built. And that was one step closer to the computer. Now, in the club, I finally found out what a microprocessor was. I hadn't looked at them since the early ones, which are too weak for me. I like computers. And this microprocessor, I took home a data sheet. Oh my gosh. The microprocessor is like all of the computers I designed in high school. One after another, after another, another. That's how I got so skilled and good at making them with few parts. And I said, oh my gosh, I know how to, I'm going to have my own computer now. Problem is, I couldn't afford $400 for an Intel microprocessor. And then I found I could get one from Hewlett-Packard where I worked for $40, a Motorola one. So I designed my whole thing on the drafting table for the Motorola processor. And basically I was taking that terminal, it could talk to a faraway computer, and it could type back to my TV from MIT. I just put my own computer. The brains is the microprocessor, and the memory had to be dynamic memory. Everybody else was copying Intel data sheets. On a data sheet with lines on paper, you could only show microprocessor has address 1 going to address 1 on a chip, address 2 going to address 2. You can only show straight wires. That's static RAM. Cost 4 times as much. It was going to make getting a useful computer, a 4K computer that could run a programming language, out of the range of normal humans. No, I put in the dynamic RAMs 1/4 as many chips. I always counted things by chips. And yes, what is a dynamic RAM compared to a static RAM? It forgets everything it knows. Every bit in the chip gets forgotten in 2,000th of a second. So you have to get in and supply some extra signals to make sure it triggers basically every row or every column in the chip to make sure it reads and rewrites its own data every 2,000th of a second. And that takes some chips. But one of the things it takes is a counter that goes this row and then that row and that row and that row counter. I already had counters for horizontal and vertical on the TV. I just reused them a second time. I always did everything I could to be clever tricks. Today you'd call it hacking. But, anyway, I had the right device and I took it down. This was called, it didn't have a name. There's no company. Steve Jobs was out of town. He didn't know it existed. So I took it to the Homebrew Computer Club and I passed out schematics to everyone in the club. Here's how you can build it. Here are the chips you use. Here's the code that I wrote for it. And everyone in the club, I passed it out, but everybody looking over my shoulders had seen computers of the past with all these switches and lights. Mm-hmm. And the computer of the future was this became the Apple I eventually. And from that point on, no computer was built without a keyboard and a video display. That was a turning point in history. But I didn't own it. I'd given it away, public domain, because I wanted to start the revolution. These are the people that are going to start the revolution. Give them the tools to do it. And then Steve came into town, and it's the opposite of what a movie shows. There's a movie with Ashton Kutcher. Mm-hmm. Steve comes and finds me in a basement, a big geek, and he calls me to a club to show it off to real people. What a farce. He'd never been to the club. I'd been there every day since it started. I was a hero at the club. Passing my stuff around, showing it off, and took him down to see the interest in it, my TV and my board and keyboards and wiring and lots of stuff OSHA would not have liked. Transformers with bare wires exposed. But took it down and he saw the interest in it. That's when he said we should start a company. And what he proposed was not a computer company. It was a company to make something he had understood from something he'd done before in his life. Make a PC board for $20. Then people can get chips from their employers, plug the chips in, and it's all soldered. It's all done. They don't have to hook wire to wire to wire to wire. That big mess. Instead of 2 weeks, they build it in one day. And we'll build the PC boards for $20. We'll sell them for $40. When you have no money, no bank accounts, no rich relatives, that's how you have to think. Mm-hmm. What can we do today with what we have? And that was our start. And it sprung, and it went further and further. Now, Hewlett-Packard, I offered it to them first, the personal computer. I loved my company, and I wanted them to build it. But they turned me down 5 times.
Yeah.
5 times for the personal computer.
They were just like, we just don't see a future.
There wouldn't have been a future if they'd done it.
Crazy.
The reason is they wouldn't have built a fun machine that could play games. They would have built it. Back then, Hewlett-Packard only built machines that engineers used, with dials and switches and power supplies and cables, only for engineers. They would have built a boring, dumb computer that engineers could have a little tiny black and white screen, chiclets, and they eventually started a program on my floor in the lab to do that. And I had just built a device with microprocessor that they were using, with dynamic RAMs they were going to use. They had 5 guys assigned to writing the basic language. I'd written one all myself on mine, and they wouldn't let me on the project even.
So they turned down the personal computer, and you built the first personal computer.
The first really good. The Apple One was not, very quickly was not going to be the substance of our life. We got a $50,000 order for PC boards with chips on them. We didn't have $50,000. We had to borrow $5,000 from a friend, and we got the parts on 30 days credit, built the computers up, delivered them, and got paid cash in 10 days.
Wow.
And we had 30 days to pay for the parts. And that's what you do when you have no money. Steve Jobs was brilliant at finding the ways that we could do something and make a step. And that was the Apple One. Before we ever shipped the Apple One, we were secretly showing my Apple II to people. Back in Atlantic City, they had a show called PC 76, and we didn't want any of these other little startup companies to see what we had. So we went down late at night when they were all gone, and there was just one guy there with a projector. I wanted to see if it works on a projection TV. It was that new. Is my color output gonna work on a projection TV? And we hooked it up with that guy, and we did. And that guy was seeing all the things that young people were trying to bring to the world as computers, and he said, "This is the one I want." We always knew that was the Apple II. So we were just showing off the Apple One. We hadn't shipped one yet, so we knew the Apple II was our future for a big company.
Wow,
that was the one. Because the Apple One wasn't designed as a Wozniak computer. It was a Wozniak terminal for the ARPANET, modified into a computer a little, but not really designed as a computer.
America. If you thought Jackass Forever was crazy, oh boy do I have a show for you. It's a multimedia comedy show called The Bucket List Tour. And the stuff I filmed for this show is way too hot for Jackass. Like the general anesthesia bike ride, the vasectomy Olympics, and skyjacking. The footage is so intense, we have full-grown men passing out at almost every city this bus goes to. So if you think you can handle it, get your tickets right now at stevo.com. Yeah.